Good morning, everyone. Jim Clarke here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary to share another contemplative focus with you. So, the focus for today for our contemplation is the mechanics of consciousness, the becoming of being. As individuated forms of consciousness, we are both observers and participators within the polarities of being and becoming, stillness and activity. We are in constant conversation with ourselves, and our conversation is our creation. In our internal dialogue, our deepest beliefs become the blueprint for how we see and experience our world. We create our experience through the language of our beliefs and emotions, and in this way, we create our state of being, which is known as the becoming of our being. Our state of being is an outcome, you might say, within the play of the polarities in terms of where we have put our focus and what kind of beliefs we have in relation to the external world that we see and experience. It is our creation. We create it, and it's our deepest beliefs that become the blueprint for our experience. Although when we're unconscious, when we're not aware of ourselves as consciousness, when we have not meditated and we're working with a very limited amount of awareness, self-awareness, then we are responding to and reacting to a world outside ourselves for the most part, and that's what we experience. We think we are the victims of circumstances. We think our happiness, our state of being is dependent upon someone or something or some state of affairs external to us, of which we have no control. And so it's a constant play of the victim trying to maintain a state of being that is somewhat pleasurable, somewhat rewarding, and so forth, but always dependent on some circumstances, some other person or people, your job, your family, and so forth and so on. You're always measuring how well you are in terms of how your relationship with the external world is. And this is because you have not put enough focus on your own state of being, the interior focus. And to do that, this is what meditation is all about. This is why meditation has been used by human beings throughout the ages, because it's simply changing emphasis from the external polarity of activity to the internal polarity of being. And in the very beginning, when you first start to meditate, there's a lot of stuff that comes up in terms of your ability to maintain any focus of that kind. And also, you'll find that your beliefs, unconscious beliefs, will come up and you might say disturb the kind of peace that you're trying to get to when you meditate. And then as you meditate over years and years, this becomes, your focus on the interior of your being becomes deeper and deeper. But the conversation and your deepest beliefs are still being processed in terms of what you're discovering when you meditate and who you are when you meditate versus who you've always thought you were and how you defined yourself through the years before you began to meditate. And the conflicts that come up between these two activities of meditation and the interior focus and the habits and the definitions that you've acquired through your life up to the point where you started to meditate. This is where you process, and this is what is processed, and it's inevitable. In my case, I know that when I was first started to meditate, I would have some very illuminating experiences, and then I would have no experience. I would struggle to try to find something that would be more consistent and more elevating, and yet a lot of times my mind would just end up taking over it, so it seemed, because I was kind of battling with my mind. I wanted to be quiet. I wanted my mind to be still. And that very intention, that very desire seemed to trigger activity in the mind, irregardless of what I did or how much I wanted it to be still. And so this went on for many years, and I kept it up because here and there I would have some very delightful experiences. I would get very expanded, and I would be very blissful, and I would have visions. I would have the experiences that were validating that there's much more to me and life than I could ever possibly know from just being focused on the external world and being active all the time. I was uncovering a part of my own existence that simply couldn't have happened, I couldn't be aware of without meditation. So I knew that this was the key, and the only way to get more of that bliss was to continue to meditate. And then I was fortunate enough at one point to discover Synchronicity Foundation. I started using their technology and meditating with their soundtracks and so forth, and the recognitions program, which took me as deep as I could possibly go at that time. And my progress, you might say, certainly increased and was much easier to maintain without periods where I just couldn't meditate at all. Meditation would simply happen, and it happened regularly, and it happened with depth. But the process resulting from that was also very continuous, and it was because I had someone here that I could speak to, someone who could help explain what was going on and the mechanics of the processes that occur when you meditate, because there are processes and you will experience them if you meditate. And once I became aware and had more understanding of what was going on and how that worked, it became easier for me to witness what was going on and not be reactive to it, which meant that I could keep meditating, and irregardless of the process I was going through, if there was some upheaval, if there was some conflicting energies between what I used to think I was and what I was experiencing and discovering through meditation, that was okay, because I knew what was going on. I knew that that was simply a process of clearing out all the data that I was holding unconsciously inside myself that I had acquired in this life in relationship to what I was discovering when I tapped into the interior of my own being and held that focus for duration, which is what meditation is. As my teacher often reminded us, he said, meditation begins where the mind ends. And trying to get the mind to end, well, that usually doesn't work at all, because it just wants to maintain its status quo, and it was meant to think, and that's what it does, so it thinks. So along the way, and after some years of practice with the understanding of the process that happens when you meditate, my mind did become more and more still, and oftentimes I would find myself going into what we call absence. It's not going to sleep, it's simply moving into a total immersion in the state of being, rather than being even aware of the external polarity, the becoming. And then I would come back and I would be very, very intoxicated and full of endorphins and blissful and very, well, peaceful. And it was through this process that I finally come to where I am now, where it doesn't matter if my mind's thinking, because my state of being has been developed now in my awareness to the point that it is now dominant in my experience. It's dominant even when I'm focused on the world outside, the external polarity of consciousness that is happening with all of us as individuated forms of consciousness. So we are both being and we are becoming. These two polarities are always playing off of one another. Meditation the practice of meditation helps you to develop more power in the polarity of being, into the polarity of stillness within yourself. That's all you're doing. It's like exercising a muscle, and you're building and building more power in the internal polarity of your existence. And as that develops and gets stronger and more consistently active, you might say, then it gradually becomes equal to, in power, the external focus, the focus of becoming. And from that point on, your experience becomes more and more dominant in the interior focus, in the experience of stillness, which is, stillness is not being still, it's not being a stone where nothing is happening. Stillness is the truth of who you are. It's the nature of who you are, and that is always happening. You can't change the truth, even though we may not be able to define it. Words can point to it, but we can never understand it until we have the experience of it. And because of how we feel and how we experience ourselves, when the interior polarity is dominant through years of practice and meditation, well, that's why everybody meditates who does meditate, because they're tired of what they're getting from being totally focused on the activity of their existence as a human being, dependent upon something or someone other than themselves for their happiness, for their well-being, for their survival. And as long as you are dependent on something external to yourself, the fullness of your being cannot happen, because you haven't quite integrated the experiences that you have in your meditation. But that's what the integrative process that is triggered from meditation is all about. It's about bringing that experience into your body. It's about bringing it into your form. It's about becoming the being, instead of being the flesh and blood body that's always doing and battling with whatever is happening with it. It's about becoming the being that you are and have always been, the being that you were before birth, the being that you will continue to be when you're done with this life. Because life, which is everywhere and everything, never ends. It just moves on. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today. The mechanics of consciousness, the becoming of being, the reversal of the power of the polarities that exist within yourself in terms of what is dominant and what is not dominant, which becomes your experience. The experience you have, that dialogue that we have with ourselves that determines our experience that I mentioned in the beginning, that's your own power at work. If you're fear-based, if you're critical, if you're negative, then that's going to be your experience, because that's what you're generating. But to gradually bring yourself to a point where that is all replaced, because your experience is becoming more and more consistently blissful and loving and accepting, first of yourself and then of your world, then your experience is commensurate with that internal dialogue that you're having. Maybe it's not even a dialogue of words. It might be a dialogue of energetic experience, a dialogue where your emotions and your thoughts are much more consistently positive, and where your physical state is much more relaxed because you're not trying to survive. You know that you exist irregardless of whether you're in a body or not. So what's to worry, Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today. It's the outcome of the practicing meditation and devoting your life to the bliss of your own being. That's really what meditation is all about. And that's why I've managed to stay where I am and continue my practice for all these years, because It's an investment that is yielding results that I couldn't get from any other way of life, simply put. So that's it for today, the mechanics of consciousness, the becoming of being. I hope this is of some help to you and helps to stimulate you and encourage you to meditate and to continue to meditate, irregardless of what experiences you must process in relation to it. I thank you for watching. I'll be here again next Tuesday with another contemplative gem to share with you. Thank you so much.